Whether you're a first-time homebuyer or you're a seasoned homebuyer and you've been through the process before, buying a home is a pretty scary process. It seems no matter who you ask, everybody has an opinion. You have your friends, you have your family, and you have random people on YouTube telling you one way and another. And the entire process can become more confusing the further you get into it. And if you are worried about any particular part of the home buying process, don't worry, you are in the majority. 97% of home buyers have at least one worry when it comes to buying a home. So in this video, I wanted to break down the 5 most common mistakes home buyers make when they go to buy a home. Hi, my name is Andy. You're a local expert in the Sydney real estate market. I help young families, first-time homebuyers and investors get into the Sydney real estate market. If that sounds like you, smash the subscribe button so you don't miss any golden nuggets along the way. First mistake on the list is not asking the agent any questions. So if you are a homebuyer in the middle of the home buying process and your Saturdays are pretty filled up with house inspections throughout the area you want to buy in, and you're not asking the agent any questions, you're just going into the inspection, having a look around and going straight back out the door, you're doing yourself a disservice. This is prime time for you to gather as much information as you can about the property that can be used later on in the negotiation process. Some typical questions you can ask, and you should be asking the agent every single time: why the vendor is selling it, how long they've owned it for, did they occupy it or was it an investment, and have there been any major renovations to the property? The reasons you're asking these questions is not for small chat or chit chat with the agent because maybe you feel a bit awkward about just going in and out, but to gather as much information as you can so you can then customize your offer if you do want to make an offer on the property depending on the answer of these questions. For example, if it's an investor and they just bought it a year or two ago, and because of the interest rates at the moment, they're now under a lot of financial stress and they need to offload the property, that puts you in a good negotiating position and it gives you good bargaining power to get a reduced price. However, if they're an owner-occupier and perhaps they're an older couple looking to downsize, they've raised their family in the property, they've owned it for perhaps 30 years, they're going to have a lot of sentimental value attached to that property. If you are a young family coming in, you can use your story that you want to raise your family in this home and that you'll look after and you'll treat it with respect like they did throughout their time living in the property. They may look at you more favorably over an investor, but you won't be able to make this offer if you don't ask the questions along the way. So many people think negotiation starts when you put the offer in. However, your negotiation does start the minute you go to the inspection, because this is where you're gathering as much information as you can about the property to be used later. The second mistake homebuyers often make is not doing enough research when it comes to buying in a certain area. So a lot of buyers go out and want to buy and live in an area that they've perhaps grown up their entire life in, think they know the area and think that's enough to be able to buy because they know the good streets and they know where the good cafes and parks in the area are. While this is important and very important for someone who doesn't know the area, it doesn't give you a good idea on the technical part of house buying when it comes to the numbers and whether you're overpaying or not and how an auction process works. I talk to so many buyers and the first auction that they attend is the auction that they plan on bidding at. They're not familiar with the auction process. They get very nervous leading up to it and they can feel extremely overwhelmed on the day of bidding. I would recommend to any home buyers who are going out and plan on buying a home, especially if they live in a state like New South Wales and Victoria where auctions are very, very common, to get out for a few weekends and just attend auctions and get very, very comfortable with the entire process. Have a look at other buyers and what tactics they employ, and have a look at the agents and the auctioneers and understand the pressure tactics that they may employ on buyers to get a higher price. Attending auctions also gives you an idea on how much certain properties are selling for at that point in time. Understand also that on the day of an auction, if you are the winner, you are expected to pay the deposit and sign the contract then and there with no cooling period off required in New South Wales. If you are looking for a certain type of property and you've been given pre-approval for finance up to a certain point, then you should go out, attend a few auctions and see if you can actually afford that type of property and whether it's within your price range. Oftentimes home buyers have an idea of what type of property they want to buy, and then finance comes through and they attend auctions and their expectations are brought down once they see how much properties are actually selling for. The third biggest mistake I see home buyers make is not making use of government and federal grants. It's no secret that one of the biggest barriers to buying a home is the upfront costs required to get in. Things like your deposit and your stamp duty are hugely significant and can run into the six figures. And with the rising cost of living at the moment, saving all those upfront costs is becoming harder and harder by the year. However, there are a number of government grants and federal grants out there that can make the home buying process a lot easier for first-time homebuyers. There are grants available that allow first-time homebuyers to significantly reduce the amount of deposit required to buy a home without having to pay lender's mortgage insurance or LMI. There are some grants out there that can waive or entirely get rid of the stamp duty costs associated with buying a home, provided you fit the eligibility requirements. And there are even grants that allow your deposit to be reduced without having to pay lender's mortgage insurance. There are even grants where the government will give you money towards building a home if you plan on building your home from scratch. And oftentimes home buyers think that if they qualify for one grant, that it eliminates them from other grants. You are allowed to combine grants, and you could get a stamp duty grant, a deposit grant, and possibly even a cash grant if you are building a home. A good mortgage broker can look after this entire application process for you. They can do out your application and send it off to the government for you. Number 4 is not getting your due diligence done in time. So depending on what way you buy the property, whether it's private treaty or through auction, it will depend on how you carry out your due diligence. Now, the obvious parts of the due diligence process are your building and pest inspection, getting a conveyancer to check over the contract of sale, and the third one, which is optional but I think should be carried out, is getting a valuer to value the property independent of what the real estate agent or your own competitive market analysis tells you. Now, if you are going down the private treaty route, which in my opinion is more favorable, it gives you more negotiation power, you do have the ability to carry out all this due diligence after the contracts have been exchanged. Now, regardless whether you're going through the private treaty route or you are going to auction, the first step you should always carry out is make sure your conveyancer has a look over the contract of sale, goes through it, make sure there's no irregularities, and if there is, to explain to you what they are. Things like caveats, easements, and covenants are all things that will be on the title of the property, and you should have your conveyancer check over them and make sure none of them are irregular, and to explain to you if there are any irregularities. If you have a long-term plan with the property, if you plan on doing a development further on down the line, then you will need to check these out and make sure that development is possible, because it would be very unfortunate if your plan to develop on the property was ruined because you didn't have the conveyancer check out the necessary documentation. Now, when it comes to the building and pest inspection and the valuer coming out, it really depends on whether you're going to private treaty or you're going to auction. In my opinion, the private treaty route is more favorable. However, in states like Victoria and New South Wales, it is a lot more common to go to auction. Usually the agent will have carried out a building and pest inspection prior to the open house inspections, and they'll usually have the report on the table somewhere like the kitchen, where other things like contract of sale and the marketing brochures for the property are laid out. You can have a look at the building and pest inspection report there and then, or you can talk to the agent and have them send you a report that you can send on to a professional or interpret it yourself. Now, depending on whether you're going to private treaty or going to auction, will depend on how you carry out your building and pest inspection and potentially get a valuer to come and evaluate the property. If you go down the private treaty route, you'll have your conveyancer check over the contract of sale, make sure everything's good, sign it, exchange with the vendor, and you'll have 30 days usually in New South Wales for settlement. In that time, you can carry out your building and pest inspection and have a valuer come to evaluate the property. There's also usually a cooling off period within that time after contracts have been exchanged. However, don't do this lightly, as it may ruin your relationship with the agent and the vendor and possibly obstruct you from creating or doing a deal with them in the future. However, if you go down the auction route, you are expected to sign the contract there and then after the auction and to pay the deposit. So it is assumed that you've carried out all your due diligence prior to the auction. And the fifth and final mistake I see homebuyers making is not having a specific auction strategy. Now, there's two reasons why you want to have an auction strategy. One, it'll mitigate your risk of potentially overpaying, getting emotional, and falling into the hype of auction day by knowing your numbers. And two, it could potentially give you a psychological edge against the other bidders and may even help you get you across the line and win the property. So you want to be very, very sure about three numbers before you go into the auction. Number one is your soft cap. This is where you would like to ideally buy the property based on your competitive market analysis and where you think the true value of the property is. The second number is your hard cap. This is the absolute upper limit, the ceiling of where you can go. You cannot go a dollar more than this value. Knowing this number before you go into an auction gives you the insurance that if it does go over that value, you're out no matter what, and you can just say, well, we tried. Trust me, you don't want to be the guy ringing up the mortgage broker after buying a home at auction, seeing if they can pull some magic money out of the sky to pay for the amount that you've overbid by. And a third number is you might want to have an increment number. And this might be a number that you bid all the way up to, say, your soft cap, at which point you might change your increment. To give an example, if your finance only allows to buy a property up to 900,000, you know that's your hard cap. You cannot go for a dollar more. However, your soft cap may be $800,000. If the auction opens around 700K mark, you may bid in 20, 30, even 50K increments. However, after the 800K mark, you may lower that down to 5, 4, 3K increments to try and slow the pace and try and get under that 900K mark. However, this is all based upon the idea that you plan on bidding first. Another strategy would be to hold back and wait, watch the other buyers, and when it gets around that 900K mark and the bidding has started to slow, put in one very strong, confident 10, 15, 20K bid to kind of ruin the confidence of the other buyers. They may perceive you as having more money. However, that is pretty much your one and only bid. It's a high risk, high reward strategy. So guys, that's it. Wrapped up 5 of the biggest mistakes home buyers make in their home buying journey. I hope that cleared up and made the entire process a lot easier for you. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button. Really appreciate it. My name's Andy. Thanks for watching.